Good afternoon. My name is John Carter. I'm the Jacksonville City Attorney, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the first session of our City of Jacksonville Ad Hoc Redistricting Advisory Committee. First thing I'd like to do is, on behalf of the Mayor and Council, to extend the appreciation and thanks to our 7 committee members who have indicated a willingness to serve and are all here tonight. Their attendance is much appreciated by the Mayor and Council and me and the whole city staff. I would like to recognize, we do have one council member with us this evening, and thank her for taking the time to come out. Dr. Washington represents Ward 4. I'd like to also reach out to all of those who may be joining us on G10 and our social media platforms, Facebook and others that I cannot name. We would like to welcome them and are glad that they're joining us by this technological means. Let's see if I can make this work. Excuse me. My clicker. You have to have the proper clicker. Let's see if that's the proper clicker. Okay. We may have to have some technical assistance. We're not.
Just say next slide.
Next slide, and we can check on this.
There you go.
Okay. All right, we're there. All right, we're going to go to the next slide, and then our staff can check, make sure that the clicker's working. Our first thing tonight is to have some introductions. I've already told you that I'm John Carter, the city attorney, and I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about me. My wife and I have been in the city of Jacksonville for 44 years. We came in 1977. I came with the district attorney's office and practiced there 3 years. I then worked in a law firm, Warlick, Milstead, Dotson, and Carter, for 22 years. The last 5 of those years I took over after my law partner, Marshall Dotson, resigned as city attorney. I took over as contract city attorney. I then was fortunate enough that the council said, "We need you down here full-time, John." And I said, "Well, I'm doing divorces and during the daytime and traffic tickets, you know, and I'm down there with y'all all night." At that time, it was very long meetings. And so I was given the opportunity in 2003, January 1, 2003, to come down here full-time. So come January 1 of 2022, I'll have been here 19 years, according to my calculations. But I have had a wonderful ability to serve several councils and to work with several mayors. And again, I'm glad to be here this evening. I want to begin so that we all may know who we are. I'm going to start with no special order to call on you to give a little bit about your background and your what you bring to the committee. I'm going to call on someone who's a friend and a familiar face to me for the last 40-something years, sometimes on opposite sides in the courtroom. Sometimes we're on the same side in the courtroom. Just depends. But Mr. Wright, Ernie serves on our Tourism Advisory Committee, and we're very thankful for that. Right now, my daughter has him occupied in court on other matters because she's a DSS attorney for abused and neglected children, and Ernie is a guardian ad litem probably for 40 years also, Ernie. But 36. But anyway, I'm going to let Ernie give us a little bit of your background.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to say welcome to everybody and thank y'all for being here on this evening. Dr. Washington, thank you very much for being here and everyone. And as John stated, I've known him since I got here, and that was I was in the Marine Corps from as a judge advocate from 78 to 82. Got out in 82. Became a member of the North Carolina Bar Association in 1982. So it'll be 40 years this year. And was with the law firm of Moore, Wright, and Hardison for a couple of years, and then Moore and Wright for 14 years, and then I've been on my own since then for about another 16 years. I served, and I enjoy serving on city boards. I give you an example. I coached 15 years, Department of Rec, coached Little League, 13 to 15-year-olds basketball. Just, I believe in giving back to the community. So I was on the redistricting committee in 2010. I think Homer was on there with me. And we had Robert, Sandy, and some others. Glenn, I think you Were you on there? Okay. With staff. And so,
That's right, Ms. Choice was with you.
Ms. Choice, how you doing this evening?
Good, how are you?
Fine, fine. So we were able to come together and hash out a plan. Now, things have changed since then. We didn't have the explosion of Western Extension at that time. I mean, it's 2010. And that was before the Shelby case, which John, I'm sure we'll talk about later on, which happened in 2013, which affected certain portions of the Voting Rights Act. So, we got along fine. The only advice I would give to the members here who have not done this before is I would ask that you treat your duty, your obligation, we're an ad hoc committee, but treat your duty and obligation as you would, and I compare it to a jury. I've tried several jury trials. Judges instruct you or give you instructions not to speak outside of the jury room, that when you deliberate, you should only talk amongst yourselves and everything. So you got to be very careful about having sidebar comments and everything of that nature. You will be watched and you may be questioned. But I would ask you to use your discretion, and whatever you do it as a group. That's the only advice that I like to give you, and treat it like the sanctity of a jury. And welcome aboard to everybody. Roll your sleeves up, fix tight your traveling shoes, because we got some work to do.
Thank you, Rudy, appreciate that. I'm gonna just go down to the next person, Mr. Maddox. He was here last Tuesday night. Mr. Maddox and I reconnected after probably a decade or so. He was a former client of one of my law partners, and anyway, it was nice to see Adam at that time. And so, Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am Adam Maddox. I'm one of the few, the proud, the native, Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I'm married, have 3 kids, was all grown now, and they having nice careers. I'm a civil engineer in tech. Familiar with maps. And I work with different things that help people make profit, and also nonprofits. I volunteer myself in those things. And one of the things that I have been doing, I also help the city with different things. So when I was offered this, I decided, why not? So it's my civil duty to just take care of business. You see, what else I can say about myself? I love to study and teach the details and accuracy of what we call the biblical studies. I've been asked to teach in the university just to give a lecture or two, but I haven't had an opportunity because of other things. Couldn't work out the schedule. So I've been well versed in many things, experience-wise. Somebody said, "You done that job before?" I said, "Yes, I've done that kind of job before."
Right.
So I just really think we can work together and make this happen. And because it's done before, I believe we can also do it right, but in a quick fashion.
Well, the next person is a complete stranger to everyone in the room. I can't begin. Glenn, of course, was a city employee for probably close to 20 years or 20 years thereabouts. And we've worked together for 18 of those years or so. But Glenn Hargett has led this committee in the past. He's here tonight, and I'll mention this a little bit later, as a committee member, not as part of staff. But Glenn, tell the group who you are.
22 years, as I just have 7 days on Carmen.
Okay.
For being part of the city there. That's my story, and, now I'm across the river with county and, hope to provide assistance.
Thank you. We appreciate your being here. Next is Mr. Kendrick Rogers. Mr. Rogers is the chairman of our Recreation and Parks Commission, and we're just glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and
My name is Kendrick Rogers. I am another native of Jacksonville. I guess the other on this board. I am a 89 grad of Jacksonville High School. Graduated from Fayetteville State in 94. Moved back to this area. Started working in the mental health field in 97. So I've pretty much been working in that arena since then. Currently working at Trillium Health Resources. As you said, serving as the chair on the Recreation and Parks Committee currently. And I'm just excited to be a part of this, help to be able to provide some input. This redistricting thing is going to be new to me. I'm a quick learner, so I really hope to be a help.
excellent. Thank you for being here. The next gentleman, I shook his hand tonight, and he doesn't remember it, but it was over at the Commons, I believe. I shook his hand a little while ago. He was shaking a lot of hands that particular day. It was on election day. But Mr. Ike Johnson, thank you. We're glad to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My pleasure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Isaiah Ike Johnson. I feel like a native. I've been, my first trip to Jacksonville was when I was 17, and I took a summer job at the Furniture Fair warehouse. And I thought I'd never see the place again, but joined the Marine Corps, and back in '74, I was back here again. So I've been in and out of Jacksonville for the last 25 years, this time about 17 years. Did 27 years in the Marine Corps, retired a major, and took a job that brought me back here as a vice president for the East Coast for Marriott, Sodexo Marriott, and we took over all the mess halls on the East Coast, and I was the vice president for that project. And that got me back here in '02, and I've been here ever since. I've since left that job, but I started a mentoring organization where we mentor in the school system, mainly out at OCLC with young people trying to make sure they get it back together and get back into their school system. Yes, I had a run at politics a little bit, but all for the good of the community. And I'm excited about this project as well because, again, it's for the good of the community. Thanks for asking me to serve.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next is Mr. Homer Spring. Homer has actually served on council. He has been on the planning board. And anyway, Homer, how about sharing some thoughts with the other members and with the public?
Thank you. I was dropped here, I guess, when my dad was stationed in the military back in the early 60s. My dad actually was moonlighting as a mechanic at the Sinclair station, which is right now where the Jacksonville landing is, but he was a helicopter mechanic. And when he was killed in Vietnam, my family stayed here, and I went to school here, graduated from White Oak in '73. Don't hold that against me, Kendrick. And then I came back as a teacher at Dixon High School. I've been teaching at Dixon High School I was taught there for 35 years and retired. The whole time I lived in Jacksonville because I love the city and I wanted to be a part of the city. And now I teach at Infinite Prague Catholic School. This is my 9th year there. I'm working on 44 years, and I plan to go at least to 50 years, but well, we'll see, maybe later than that. I'm a math teacher and a statistician. I've taught AP Stats and AP Calculus. I, too, enjoy looking at maps. My kids don't enjoy it at school quite as much as I do. I was on City Council in 1997. I filled the unexpired term of Morris Daughtery. And I've been on planning board off and on since 1996. Chairman and vice chairman probably like 3 times each. And also served with Kendrick on Parks and Rec. And I too am looking forward to being on this committee. I know it's interesting and it's hard work, and no matter what we do, I'll probably end up going to the wrong place to vote when it comes time to vote. So, thank you.
Thank you, Homer. And our final one is our young lady who's a member, but Tiffany has been here before. She was here in 2010.
I was.
And she is a product of Jacksonville Youth Council, I like to say, and I'm sure Mr. Hargett feels a lot of pride in that too. Tiffany, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Tiffany Choice, and I'm a native of Jacksonville as well, having graduated from Jacksonville High School, graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, and came back to Jacksonville to work in the family business at Chick-fil-A. And during that time, my service in Jacksonville started back in the beginning of high school when Mr. Hargett came to my school talking about serving with the Jacksonville Youth Council. So that began my service to the community. I feel it's a duty to serve in your community and to do it well. So I'm looking forward to being a part of the redistricting committee as I'm involved in other activities within the community and feel that it is important to serve. So I thank you all so much for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to being a part.
Thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate that. Thank you all for your introductions. Each one of you has a redistricting 2020 staff list, and I'm going to go over it and have these folks raise their hands. But you, by having this document in front of you, will know some of their background and why they're on our staff committee that's working to get the documents and different things ready for you. Dr. Richard Woodruff, our city manager, is sitting over here with us. He's with us this evening. Ronald Massey, deputy manager, is here. Anthony Prinz, our transportation director, is here, and then we have Terrence Braxton, our interim IT director, is here with us. Angelia Hagapin, and I'm sure I messed up the last name, but Angelia is what we will be referring to, but she is our senior GIA analyst, and this is the lady I think you'll come to appreciate because she can deal with the census blocks and talk the talk. It's like if you want to talk Greek, don't talk to me because I don't talk Greek, but Angelia will be the person there. We have Lisa Miller of our media staff. She's senior information and communication specialist, and our city clerk, Carmen Miracle, who sits here beside me. And we appreciate all their work. You know, you may not realize it, but for 2 months, this group has met pretty much on a weekly basis. We put a lot of work in this process even before the census data came out, and we continue to do that. Tonight, however, is going to be my time to talk, and I hope the future meetings that my talking is very, very limited, but tonight I'll end up doing more than probably I want to do. But what I want to do is share with you a class, what I'll call Redistricting 101. And I hope that part of this, each of you also, committee members, were sent the resolution that council passed. You don't have to have that with you tonight, but in that it was, number 3 says the committee shall prepare and execute a public education plan. Well, I hope when I finish, you'll think that at least this is part of that education plan, that we have at least taken one step in that direction. And this is a note to myself, but I need to say it out loud, and I want you to understand. As I go through this, I'm not just talking to you, as you know. I'm talking to whoever may be at home sitting right now in front of their TV or with their laptop or their iPhone watching us, or whoever may watch that video on Facebook 5 days from now. I want to try to make this as elementary as I can as we walk through, because I am talking to everyone as well as my committee that sits here. And again, thank you. All right. I want to start with the first 3 slides, and if you watched the council meeting last Tuesday night, you've seen these before. But I think we need to identify, at least in my mind, what the issue is, and then we'll go forward and we'll talk about the law, and we'll go forward and talk about going forward from here. But these are the slides I used last Tuesday. The committee's direction is to come up with a plan that you can recommend to council. The city council, by law, is the only jurisdiction agency that has the authority to approve the redistricting plan. You're an advisory committee to them. You, as well as they, are restricted to using the 2020 census block data information. And we're going to get to that in a moment. That's our population, et cetera. We're going to talk in a little while about wards being compact, contiguous, et cetera, and we're going to talk about definitions. These are guidelines, these are legal guidelines, and they have been set out by statutes or by case law. The wards must be a plus or a minus 5%, and I'm going to get on that in the next slide here in a moment. That wasn't the law in 2010. The law in 2010 said a 10% deviation. And we'll talk about how that's different. And I'll read to you a little section from the School of Government, Bob Joyce, a professor there, who wrote a comment on that. And of course, the wards must be in substantial equality. talks about substantial equality, and I'll talk about it in a moment. But when staff comes in the next 2 or 3 meetings and they talk to you, they'll be talking about the term balancing. And what they're going to be referring to is having it between the minimum ward size and the maximum ward size. Okay. I don't know what I did there, but okay. The census data is here. You probably read about it in the paper, saw it on the news, etc. The 2020 census population for the city of Jacksonville is 72,723. And I had that figure, we were in like 70,000 and some change in 2010. Basically, we gained 2,500 persons. But again, we're bound by this number. So if you take this number and you divide it by 4, a perfect ward would mean that each ward has 18,180 people in each. Remember, we talked about a plus or a -5 deviation. So you have to say 5% of 18,180, and my math, and I've had it checked by others, that's 909 people. So to find the minimum size ward, you take that 18,180 and subtract 909, and that comes up with the figure next, 17,271. To find the maximum size ward, you take that 18,180 and add the 909 to it, and you come up to 19,089. Between those numbers, the minimum and the maximum will be the balance, if you will, any ward might be. This is the ward population per the 2020 census in the highlighted sections there. And it's highlighted according to the colors that we kind of associate with the different wards. Again, at the top there, you have 72,723. That's the census total population. Ward 1 has 19,386. Ward 2, 14,691. Ward 3, 21,129. And Ward 4, 17,517. Again, the ward equal mean population, everybody being equal, is the 18,180. And the minimum size and the maximum size is there at the bottom. Well, the first thing that pops out to you, I think, and to me is, hey, we have one ward that if we don't have to do anything with, theoretically. Now, we're going to probably do something with it because if you look at it, Ward 4 has 17,517 people. It's barely, I'll say, by 300 or so, 250, above the minimum size. So there's room for some growth there before you get to the maximum size. Ward 1, 19,386. According again to my math, that's 297 persons over the maximum size. So those folks have got to go somewhere, et cetera. This is where we get into a balancing act when we actually get into the maps and the population and the census data. But this is just to kind of give you an idea. I will say this, and I've said it publicly before. The city of Jacksonville, and I'm going to talk about how we may suffer in a while. The city of Jacksonville, we believe, I'm sure Mr. Hargett believes and others, that 72,723 is an undercount of the population for the city of Jacksonville. If we only grew in the last 10 years 2,500, a lot of us sitting around this table are going to say, really? Doesn't matter what we think. We're bound by that number at this time, and that's what we have to redistrict on. But again, from the city perspective, I'll talk about in a moment how that number, the census population number, affects finances and so forth, because it does affect us going forward. But from the redistricting committee's obligation, your obligation, the mere fact, unfortunately, that by the population count of the Census Bureau, we only grew, and I'm using a round number here, 2,500 persons, I think you will find eventually makes your job a lot simpler than if we'd have grown by 10, 15,000 people. Again, time will tell on that. Okay. I want to talk a moment about ward history. In 1987, a committee was established by the council to consider changing, and this is coming from the minutes of the City of Jacksonville Council meeting, the mode of election to better facilitate black representation on council, end quote. That committee held some meetings with some members of the African American community. No resolution or acceptable proposal came forth. In 1989, a federal lawsuit was filed, and I'll name a few of the parties, by Jerome Willingham, Ernest Wright, and others, against the city of Jacksonville and its council, asking that the federal courts intervene and set up a system that would better facilitate black representation on council. That lawsuit was settled in 1991, and the result of that lawsuit, the ward system that we exist under today was established. Redistricting has occurred 3 times since that 1991 lawsuit was settled and the wards were established. 2001, based upon 2000 census, 2011, based upon 2010, and now we're in 2021, based upon 2020 census information. The history will show the following. There was a 2000 redistricting committee consisting of Greg Johnson, a former city member, Ernest Wright, or Ernie Wright, a former county commissioner at that time, and still I guess is, Robert Sandy, a city council member, and Fannie Coleman, at that time a city council member. That was 2000. In 2010, a redistricting committee again was established by the council, and Mr. Greg Johnson, a former city council member, sat on that. Mr. Ernie Wright, again, sat on that. Mr. Robert Sandy, a former council member. Mr. Homer Spring, a former council member. Tiffany Burgess Choice, a former youth council chairperson. And we had alternate members at that time, Margaret Brown, former chairman of the Onslow County Board of Education, Jan Bean Slagle, a former mayor, and Robert Warlick, an attorney, who at that time was a member of the Chamber's Governmental Affairs Committee. So you see, this is the ward system history. But I would be terribly amiss if I didn't call on my friend and colleague, Mr. Wright, to add, because he has lived through this. He was a party to the lawsuit. He has sat on, 1, 2, 3 redistricting committees. Mr. Wright, would you like to add anything to the history that I have shared with the committee and with the public?
Just briefly, 1989, the group that filed the lawsuit was called the Voting Rights Task Force. A lot of people, Sylvester Howard, who is still living, was a member of that. You had James Brown, who was on the school board, I believe he was a member of that. And basically, we ended up settling on the hybrid system. Now, back then, the Justice Department, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, you had to have it pre-cleared, your plan, through the Voting Rights Act back then. Well, Shelby versus Holder has changed the pre-clearance, so you don't need to do that now. But the first plan that was sent up by the city was rejected, I believe.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And then a second one had to be drawn. In the meantime, we filed suit, we settled, we got the hybrid system that we have now, the 4 wards and the 2 at large. And you've seen the results of it. So it was just, that's pretty much, John's pretty accurate with what has happened up to that point in the members.
Thank you.
That's all I
Ray.
wanted to add.
I want you to know, we lawyers, we throw around words, pre-clearance, et cetera. We're going to define all this for you. Just bear with me.
Add hammer
It's
down
hard to tell what to come first. But again, I felt like the history should be first.
Yes.
So let's go to the next slide. If I can make my clicker work. The United States Constitution establishes the one person, one vote. You know, and I've had folks to ask me this, well, John, your committee's getting ready to redistrict. Shouldn't it be redistricted upon registered voters? That's not what the Constitution says. It's one person, one vote. So it's not registered voters, it's everybody. It's infants, it's older people who are in nursing homes, et cetera. It's persons that are in jail today, or in April when the census was. So again, that is one clarification. It is based upon population. It's not based upon being registered to vote. Redistricting is required every 10 years after a census, and that's what we're in the process of beginning that tonight. The Jacksonville redistricting is required due to ward systems. I believe you will find that there's towns in the Onslow County that do not have the ward system, and actually they'll have an election in November. But of course, our election is going to be pushed off to March. But again, it's because of the ward system that that's required. I told you a moment ago, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the census. Redistricting is just one tree in a forest of different things that the census controls. In North Carolina, you probably heard and read, we're actually going to get another person in Congress because of the population increase. Redistricting, well, that's going to be a redistricting of the whole state. But again, the census, the population for the whole state, is causing that. But let's come down to the local level a little bit. We're actually an entitlement city for community development funding, block grant funding. We're that because of our population. Again, you have to have a high enough population to become what they call an entitlement city, where the money is sent directly to the city to disperse in accordance with CDBG guidelines. Redistricting, population affects the sales tax. It's going to affect us. The county grew 13, 14%. We grew 2.4%. We're 14th in the state. It's going to affect that. And it affects all types of state-shared resources. And if you'll recall, Mr. Hargett, when he was with us, after every council meeting, there was a census moment, and he got out here and he pled, please, return your cards, go on the computer, click the right boxes, and so forth. We need a complete count. And Glenn and the Civic Affairs Committee headed that up. And anyway, we give them credit for trying to get that information out. Now we're going to a little bit of law school, but it's going to be very simple. Redistricting guidelines are set by, as I said, statute and case law. And we're going to go over a few of those here. There's about 7, and I want to talk about them individually. Wards need to be compact. We're going to talk a little bit about racial and political gerrymandering. And we'll talk about, some of you are familiar with that term, what that means. Some of the notes, legal notes would say that to be compact, a ward would need to have boundaries that are smoother boundaries, not contorted boundaries, and it wouldn't be one with more squiggly boundaries, etc. Another comment was, it has to be compact to a degree the district or the ward spreads from a central core, which is called dispersion, so that you have few pieces sticking out from the center. Let me give you what I talk and think about it as compact. I have a ball of dough here in front of me. I work the dough and I get it round, and I'm going to put it in the oven and I'm going to bake a round loaf of bread. That is compact. I can take that same dough and I can use it like my mama used to do and spread it out here into a long thing, and I can do a circle and I can do a V. Anybody know what I've made? It's a pretzel. A pretzel is not compact. It has spaces between it. So again, compactness is trying to keep your districts together like that. The second one here is contiguous. This is what the law says. A district is contiguous if you can travel from any point in the district to any other point in the district without crossing the district's boundaries. Let me give you another simple example. 2 hands, both of them are Ward 1. There's a space between it. If that space between it is a river, a creek, a road, in the eyes of the law, Ward 1 is still contiguous if this is the only place that it touches. You with me? Now, if between Ward 1 is Ward 2 here and Ward 1 does not touch in any other way, then that is not contiguous and that is not compact and that would not pass a legal test. The third one is to preserve communities of interest. So legal says that a community of interest is just a group of people with a common interest. Usually a common interest that, such as subdivision, that's a community interest. The existing wards are a community interest. And in fact, I found in the town of Cary, the first redistricting guideline principle says the following. You shall use the existing, and it says district, but I'm going to put in the word ward. You shall use the existing ward boundaries as the starting point for making changes to new council ward boundaries. So again, we need to start with the existing wards. They have stood the test of time. They are communities of interest. Let me tell you what happened on Tuesday night. Discussion came up. Mr. Jackson, Councilman Jackson says, look, the interest of my ward, and we were talking about town center apartments, I'm interested in that topic. The interest of my ward is totally different from Dr. Washington's ward, totally different from Ward 2 and Ward 3. Again, each ward has certain interests, and those are the type things that keep these wards together. But again, that is one of the guidelines that we need to be thinking about as we move forward here. The other one there, minimizing the split of census blocks. And again, this is not, you shall not split census blocks. And I can tell you right up front, you will probably be splitting a census block, because to have the wards as they exist today, that is based upon the 2010 census, there was a census block split in Ward 1, between Ward 1 and Ward 3. And again, that same census block is a whole census block, and so we'll be talking to you when we come back with some ward maps. We'll talk about splitting that to maintain the existing wards today before we ever begin the conversation of how we deal with the 297 in Ward 1 as far as decreasing that and so forth. But again, and Angelia, our senior GIS analyst, will be talking to you when she speaks at a later time as to there's a formula that you use when you have to split census blocks so that you can apportion so much of the population in one area and so much in another. Again, that's information that will be coming in the future. The law also would like you to minimize as far as split of election precincts. This is a tough one. You have split election precincts before, and there will be election precincts split this time. The law favors that, of course, trying to help out the election board. And, as far as ballots, you have to know your address, whether you know you're in Ward 1 or you're in Ward 4, et cetera, and so forth. But again, we'll be getting into that. The next one, I'm going to actually give you a case cite, as lawyers do. Avoid pairing incumbents. The United States Supreme Court in Bush versus Vera in 1996 said and recognized, quote, that incumbency protection, at least in the limited form of avoiding contests between incumbents, is a legitimate state goal. Expecting incumbent members of a city, county, or a school governing board not to look out for their own interest is asking too much. It is fully defensible to make every effort to ensure that after redistricting, no two incumbents share a district. Some people call this double bunking. But again, at the end of the day, this committee will work toward, again, if you're going to be successful selling this to council, we need to keep our incumbents in their respective wards here, not, again, moving them. And there's case law, as I said, to deal with that. The other one is to consider future growth. And this is when you'll really be getting into your maps and looking at where will the city of Jacksonville grow? And we have staff here that will talk to you about some of the home developments, et cetera, that we expect to come online and so forth. And again, you can consider that as you move forward as far as your redistricting. And we will ask you to consider that. Okay. Pre-clearance. In 2010, Mr. Hargett headed up this committee. He was on staff. And we knew at that time that whatever the committee recommended and the council adopted had to be pre-cleared by the Department of Justice. What does that mean? It basically meant this at that time. It meant that the plan had to be sent to the Department of Justice. They had to review it. They had to call leaders in the African-American community, make sure they were aware of it, make sure they did not feel that their voting power, if you will, had been diluted by the redistricting. And at the end of the day, they would pre-clear or not pre-cleared. As Mr. Wright said, the first time the plan went up in the late 80s and 90s, it was not pre-cleared the first time, had to go up a second time. But that's what pre-clearance is. The case Ernie is talking about is the Shelby County versus Holder case, which in 2013 basically said the following. Well, let me tell you where I'm reading this from, so you'll know my source. Bob Joyce has written a primer, if you will, on redistricting. And so he's putting a lot of these notes there, and again, he's the professor there, but I want to read this from you because he says, in recent redistricting cycles, a large number of jurisdictions in North Carolina had a special obligation related to the use of race in redistricting. That special obligation no longer exists. In North Carolina, there were 40 counties that were covered under the pre-clearance requirement. Onslow County was one of those 40 counties. And that was under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And so we had to submit, as I said, changes to the Department of Justice for review and approval. And that was known as pre-clearance. In 2013, the United States Supreme Court, in this Shelby versus Holder case, basically said, we can't go there. And this is why they said that. They said, you're asking them to pre-clear it based upon data that's 40 years old. We do not find, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, what the court said, we do not find that to be relevant today. If the Congress wants there to be pre-clearance, then they need to submit new data so that, again, there's a new list of maybe who's under the pre-clearance requirement and who's not. It's my understanding that that conversation is occurring in Congress, but nothing has been come forth from Congress. And at this point in time, and until this redistricting is over, again, there is no requirement to pre-clear. We do not have to go to the Department of Justice. What you recommend to the council, or what ultimately the council decides, that is the final story. No pre-clearance by the Department of Justice. However, we do have Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act that still exists today. Section 2 deals with prohibiting voting practices or procedures that discriminate on the basis of race, color, or membership in one of the language minority groups as identified in this particular act. As it says here, most of the cases arose when you had large election schemes. And that, again, was one of the arguments back in the late 80s and the 90s with the lawsuits that were pending as far as, again, denial there. This act, as far as is permanent and has no expiration date, so it does still exist, the Voting Rights Act, not to take any action to discriminate on the basis of race, color, etc. Now I want to talk about racial and political gerrymandering. And Bob Joyce writes that when there was a move from at-large elections to the electoral districts, like we've talked about in the late 80s and the early 90s, it provoked a lot of lawsuits. Those lawsuits, again, were based upon the fact that, again, folks were saying race was used in the drawing of districts. And in the decades of the 2010, the United States Supreme Court has found that districts drawn by the General Assembly, and I think some of this carries forth to us, for legislative seats and for seats in the United States House of Representatives were unlawful racial gerrymandering based upon an improper interpretation of the law. Political gerrymandering. In 2019, and a case went to the United States Supreme Court saying that congressional districts in North Carolina and another state, as I recall, were unconstitutional because they were partisan gerrymandering. Supreme Court said, sorry folks, we don't have jurisdiction. But let me tell you who has jurisdiction. Your state courts have jurisdiction. So in September 2019, a 3-judge panel in Superior Court judges took up this challenge, and they held that the 2018 state legislative districts were unconstitutional as partisan gerrymandering under the North Carolina Constitution. 2019, that same panel took up a case involving it and again required them to draw, that is the legislature, to draw new districts. When I think of gerrymandering, and some of y'all may have the same thoughts, I think of a serpentine district, an elongated district that kind of wiggles. Where does that word serpentine come from? I think it comes from serpent, snake. The North Carolina legislature has been in litigation for the last 10 years over these plans. One courtroom after another. It has been the Election Lawyers Job Security Act. We do not need to go there. We do not need to consider racial or partisan issues in the redistricting tasks that you have been assigned by the council. People ask me sometimes, John, you're the city attorney. Boy, you must be down in court a lot defending the city. I said, nope, really, that's not my job. My job, as I see it, is to do the very best that I can in keeping the city and the staff who serves the city to keep us out of court. And if we do or are called to court, that we're on the best legal grounds possible. We try to do that every day. And I will try to do that as we walk through this. So racial and partisan gerrymandering is a no-go in our discussions with trying to redistrict the 2,500 population that you have to redistrict. All right. We're doing pretty good here. I don't want to keep you here all night. All right. The North Carolina legislature had to take an act to do something. They knew that we wouldn't get the census data so that you could redistrict and have the election in November if you had a ward system. And so Senate Bill 722 was passed. It had a lot of stuff in it. It had stuff in it about Raleigh, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, the governor wouldn't even sign it. That's the long and short of it. But he let it become law because it can become law without his signature. And a lot of it doesn't apply to us, and we won't go there. But what applies to us is the following. It says that the municipality with elections delayed in accordance with this act shall provide an opportunity for public input after the release of the 2020 census data and shall conduct at least one public hearing prior to adopting revised districts. Part of this committee's responsibility, and will be on the next meeting where you will actually engage more in conversation, hopefully. We're going to talk about where do we go from here. The council, through their resolution, has said, you need to execute a public education plan. Again, I've already said, I hope what I'm doing tonight is at least step one in that public education plan. And we're going to talk about COVID and some other things in a little while because life isn't like it was in 2010 for many reasons. But in addition to that, your responsibility or our responsibility is to work toward a public input session. Staff has talked with council, and Ron and Anthony are here, and they have worked with DOT. And we want to at least offer you the possibility of fashioning that to some extent after the way DOT does their transportation public input sessions that they have. But again, that's for a discussion at a later date. But again, those are assignments that we will be talking about in the future. Again, 722 applies to us. We're a city with wards, and it moves elections from November 2nd, 2021 to March 8th, 2022, just like the slide on the board says. So here are your ward districts as they exist today based upon the 2010 census. And I need a break, so I'm going to turn it over to, not Vanna, but our city clerk, Carmen, who's going to cover the next two slides. Carmen, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter, and good evening, committee members. As you know, we have 7 council members. We have the mayor, who is elected at large, 2 council members are elected at large, 4 members elected by wards, and all 7 members are serve 4-year staggered terms.
I'm sorry, falling down.
As you know, our elections are normally held in November in the odd years, so it should have been held in 2021, 2023, 2025, and I just told you that it was 4-year staggered terms, but our council is elected every 2 years. Basically, half of our council is elected every 2 years because of the staggered terms. We have 4 members elected in one election, and 2 years later, the other 3 members are up for election. In the next election, actually, we have 5 council members who are up for election, wards 1 and 2, and our 2 at large. We also have Ward 3, and that election is for the unexpired term of former Mayor Pro Tem Lazara, now currently Senator Lazara, and his remaining term will be for 2 years. So we'll have Ward 1 and 2 and the 2 at large running for 4-year terms, and Ward 3 running for the unexpired term of 2 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Carter.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Comments reference the difference between the 2010 redistricting and the 2020 redistricting. First thing is COVID-19. We have a pandemic. Didn't have that in 2010. That's something you need to think about. We certainly have some rules and regulations here at City Hall. I appreciate everyone wearing your mask. I hope everyone's been vaccinated, and I hope anyone listening to the sound of my voice will immediately go out and get vaccinated or talk to your doctor about it. This is imperative in this county, where we read every day about the number of cases, the number of deaths that Glenn sends us out emails from the county. Please, we need everyone vaccinated. But COVID-19 is certainly going to maybe impact the way this moves forward compared to what happened in 2010. There's been some changes in the law. We've already talked about, I had no idea, and I don't think Glenn had an idea when we sat here in 2010, that pre-clearance would be done away with by the United States Supreme Court. That's done away with. The 10% rule is done away with, and now we have the 5+ and the -5. Both of these, the 10% and the 5+ and -5%, are established by cases in North Carolina and by Superior Court cases. And Bob Joyce writes this about it. He basically is arguing we need to use the 5+, 5- to stay. But he says this: the plus or -5%, let me start over. The plus or -5% rule is more conservative than the 10% rule. Every plan that violates the plus or -5% rule will also violate the 10% rule. But the same is not true the other way around. Using the 10% rule could result in a decision not to redistrict in a situation in which the plus or -5% rule would require redistricting. And the clear possibility is a legal challenge. So we will be looking at the 5%, the minimum, maximum ward size that we've talked about up there. 2010 was a lot different. My iPhone then was an iPhone 4. I have available, even though I don't have, is an iPhone 12. Technology has changed. One of the greatest changes is the broadening of social media. You hear about this all the time as far as national elections, about how this has been affected by Facebook and, you know, all these folks that are having to go in front of Congress. But let's bring it down to a lower, closer level. As we've indicated, we're being streamed right now on G10. We're also being, the term's not streamed, I'm sure, but we're on Facebook, I'm sure, live, Facebook Live. And as people sit in their homes or wherever they work, or looking at that or whatever, there's at the bottom, you can put comments. They can say, John, you need a shave. Or they can say, John, you need to explain that one more time, I don't understand it. Would you go over that next time when we come back? We have an opportunity through the broad expanse of social media to have input that I don't believe existed in 2010. I think you as a committee need to take advantage of that, especially with COVID-19. Think about that, because we're going to be talking about that in future meetings. If you haven't noticed, there's been a change in staff. We have a new senior GIS analyst, Angelia. The GIS analyst, Chris Contreras, is no longer here. He was with us in 2010. And if you haven't noticed, I'm not Glenn Hargett. Glenn was here in 2010. He's here today, but not as a staff member. He's here as a committee member. Glenn's background is in journalism. My background is in the law. Maybe that gives us a little thinking different, I don't know. You can appreciate or not appreciate what I've tried to do this evening to explain the law to you in reference to redistricting. One thing Glenn and I definitely have in common, we have blue blood in our veins. And it's not dark blue, it's Carolina blue. Because both of us went to Carolina and we're Carolina fans. And we're glad Glenn's here this evening. But again, there's going to be a difference because of that, especially I'm speaking now to those 3 or 4 who were here in 2010 again. So what does all this mean? As far as presentations, I think you'll see there's probably I had less slides than Glenn would have had, and what mine are just what I call an outline, because it tickles me to remind me or to look at my notes to remind me to talk about certain things. A lot of words on the screen bother me because I get distracted. I need to tell you what's in my heart, what's in my mind, and what's on my paper here, and keep focused, not to be going back and forth between slides. That's just the way I am. Mr. Wright and I won't go quick down this road far, but I was a trial lawyer, and I didn't have a lot of technology in 1977 when I first started, and I had to get up there in front of the jury, and I had to, by words, explain to them why they should find my client innocent or guilty, the defendant's client, et cetera. So again, it's a different background, different thing. I think you'll find that with these changes, there's a new way of presentation. We've talked to the council, and we will be doing and are working on presentations as far as static displays, using, again, the maps that we'll be presenting up there to you, PowerPoint presentations with, we'll be doing this like the manager has been doing council budget hearings. And if you haven't done that, basically sit here, makes a presentation, council member asks a question. Well, I don't know that, but let me write it down. We will get back with you. We will be doing that because there may be questions you ask about, well, what if we moved this census block over there? How would that affect it? We might not have the answer to that. Angela, I expect will, because she can tell you a lot of this. But again, we will write notes and we will get back to you at the next meeting if we can't immediately answer it at that point in time. As far as the, again, public input, we'll be talking more about that next time, but we will be looking to, especially social media, we're, I think, working on setting up our webpage to have maybe a link where if you want to ask a question or make a comment about redistricting, again, you can do that. Our clerk is always available for emails, et cetera, and so forth. So we'll be moving in that direction. So let's talk about some options. The statute that I talked to you about, Senate Bill 722, actually sets up two options. City Council has asked us to try to go with option one. So let's talk about option one. On August 17th, the City Council appointed you, sitting here at 7, as the appointed members of the committee. Through this date and October, we will be working together to come up with public input, to come up with public education, to come up with different redistricting plans that you may want to offer as far as to the public who might give input of, I like Plan 1, but I don't like Plan 2, et cetera. So again, we're going to get to that. But they would like to have before council, on November the 2nd, an adoption. Now again, at that time, we would have to plan for at least a public hearing. But part of that is because the law does allow there to be a delay, and even in the resolution here, it says, you know, the committee will make a recommendation to council. It might be, as the resolution says here, that after hearing it, the council says, committee, we appreciate all the hard work you've done, but would you take a little bit more time based upon the public comments that we've heard and some things we've heard out in the community, take a little bit more time and look at whether these particular blocks need to be in this particular ward, et cetera. So it may be that we have to come back in the next 30 days and do a little bit of tweaking. I don't know, again. But again, council would like to have at least hopefully the final draft, but at least a draft to review and have a public hearing on November 2nd. The Board of Elections, if you go by this plan, would receive it by November the 17th. And this is critical. If you go by this plan, option one, the filing period begins on Monday, December the 6th and ends on Friday, December the 17th. Now, the way the Board of Election works and the way this statute works, the filing period begins at 12 noon on the 6th and ends at 12 noon on the 17th. So there's 9 full days that people will have a chance to file, to run for these offices that the clerk just went over to you that will be available. I think there's 5, as she went over with you, that will be available. So again, this is a longer filing period than option 2 gives you. So let's go to option 2. The statute, that is Senate Bill 722, does allow for a delay. We've talked about the August 17th appointment. It can be delayed where you would have the month of September, October, and November and report to the council on December the 7th, public hearing, and they would have to adopt it because they've got to get it to them. Drop dead date has to be there so that they will have it in hand on December the 17th. But the significant thing is that last bullet. the period there is going now from 9 days to 4 days. It begins on Monday, January 3rd, and ends on Friday, January 7th. 4 days. So you cut your public out 5 days if you can't meet option one as far as the filing period. Mr. Johnson, you're familiar with that. There's a lot of considerations that people want to take into whether they want to file. One of the things is I might want to see who I'm running against. That may be one of the things I want to think about before I go and put my money down and file. But there's a lot of considerations. But this gives the public, the city of Jacksonville residents, some more opportunity. So you can see where council is wanting us to work toward option two. Excuse me, option one. Thank you, Mr. Manager. I appreciate it. Election day is going to be on March 8th. And let me stop right there. And I've talked a lot and I've talked fast. And don't hold that against me just because lawyers talk fast. But I want to stop and see if there's anything that I've said that causes you to have a question that maybe I can answer now, or I can write down and maybe bring an answer to you next time we meet. I'm impressed.
John, I do have.
Yes, sir.
One kind of question, comment. Much has been made of, I call it partisan, potential partisan gerrymandering, meaning political gerrymandering by party, Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated. The figures that were being thrown about by an unnamed individual were county figures. There's many more of these members of this party than there are many more of this party. I just want to make sure people need to understand we're not into county redistricting. We're into city redistricting. Whatever the figures are for the county, we have no standing because that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the citizens of the city, not the county. So any talk about how many there are in the county versus this, that, and the other, we need to ignore. Because it's the city residents that have jurisdiction. We don't do anything on the county level. I just want to make that clear.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. When you get down to looking at ward maps and numbers and moving population from one ward to another, et cetera, I will keep you away from those serpents. I will call you out if you go down those roads talking about party or race. This is a pure mathematical equation trying to follow the 7 or 8 things as far as the guidelines that we have. We're going to do our very best to stay legal, and I think all of you will work with me toward that.
That's a promise that we all made.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any other questions? Don't want to cut anybody off. Appreciate your time, and y'all certainly worked like we have too, but this is what we would like to do next. We would like to have a 2-week delay. We have Labor Day coming up, et cetera, some holidays. And we would like to come back at 5:30, if that time is convenient for everyone. Wednesday's a good day, if it's for us. Glenn is with the county. They have twice a month at least, evening Monday night meetings. And with the city council, we have twice a month meetings with the city council. So again, if Wednesday works for everyone and everyone was able to accommodate tonight, we'd like to stay with Wednesdays at 5:30 and come on September the 8th. I don't have an agenda now, but some of the things we will be talking about is going forward. Again, looking at the resolution, looking at public input, looking at the COVID situation, how we can have public education more, and we just want to have a discussion. We may or may not talk about a map. I don't know at this point in time. But again, we will begin the process, and I want to end like this. Again, I'm not Glenn, and Glenn's not me. And this committee is going to be a little different. But if we all committed to meet at the museum tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in Richlands, some of us are going to take Gum Branch Road. Some of us are going to take 258 and 24. But you know what? We're all going to get there. And I promise to you, even though it'll be a little different maybe, we're going to get there. And we're going to work with you, and your voices will be heard because you are been appointed by the council. And again, I'll start or end like I started. and thanking you on behalf of the mayor and council for your service. And again, we're going to work to keep you here an hour, no more than an hour and a half. Again, you're going to control a lot of that by the dialogue that occurs in the future meetings. But again, I'll be glad to answer any questions, and if not, I'm going to adjourn this meeting in just a few minutes, or a few seconds. Any final questions or comments? Thank you again for your attention. We do appreciate your service. And this meeting is now adjourned until the 8th at 5:30. Thank you.